I thought I was ready for my first cruise. I had spent months reading cruise forums, researching ships, planning excursions, and convincing myself I understood exactly what to expect once we stepped on board. But I didn't. Because your first crew has a way of humbling you fast. The second we stepped on board, it felt like sensory overload, and a lot of the things I stressed over beforehand barely mattered once we were there. In fact, the most important lessons I learned on that first cruise came from things I never saw coming. I thought I was ready for my first cruise, but I was wrong. If we haven't met yet, I'm Evan from Family at Sea. If this is your first time watching my channel, I'm glad you're here. And if you've been here a while, you already know how much I appreciate you. If you're ready, I am. Let's go. Looking back, one of the biggest mistakes I made before my first cruise was assuming a cruise is just, well, a cruise. But the experience can change completely depending on the cruise line, the specific ship you choose, and even when you decide to go. Some ships feel like non-stop parties with loud music and packed pool decks from morning until midnight. Others feel quieter and slower paced, where people were more interested in relaxing than staying out till 1 a.m. And I didn't realize before my first cruise how important it was to choose something that actually matched the kind of vacation we wanted on what was our honeymoon. Because if you book the wrong ship for what you're looking for, you'll spend the entire cruise wondering why everybody else seems to be having a better time than you are. Something I completely underestimated on my first cruise was how much your stateroom location can affect the way the whole trip feels. At the time, I thought a cabin was just a place to sleep, but I didn't realize that some cabins are directly underneath pool decks, nightclubs, gyms, or busy public areas, and you absolutely will hear it. Especially early in the morning when crew members start dragging lounge chairs across the deck above you. Now, I only book cabins that have other cabins above them, below them, and on both sides, and it's not the most exciting booking strategy in the world, but sleep became a whole lot more important after that first cruise. Before my first cruise, I thought using a travel agent would just make the trip more expensive while taking away my ability to be in control of our travel, so I tried to plan everything myself. And I spent so much time stressing over cabin choices, pricing, excursions, and all the little details that I barely understood at the time. But what I didn't realize at the time is that good cruise travel agents can actually save you money through group rates that aren't publicly available, while also helping you avoid a lot of the mistakes first-time cruisers make and taking on the stress of handling any unexpected issues, so I didn't have to. And looking back, there were so many things I learned the hard way on that first cruise that probably would have been solved if I'd taken the time to find a good travel agent. And that's exactly why now we book through Cruises It. Instead of trying to figure everything out the hard way, you're working with people who actually understand the ships, the timing, and how all of these little decisions change your experience once you're on board. They've helped us save money, avoid bad cabin choices, and make sure we're actually getting the kind of trip we're hoping for, not just what looks good on paper. And even if you already booked your cruise, if it was within the last 30 days, you can still add them to your reservation so you know you've got somebody in your corner for anything you may need. Which is more than I can say for Frank, who probably told me, "Evan, I don't need a travel agent, I already did all the research," and then booked a guaranteed cabin that ended up being directly underneath the nightclub. Frank, your vacation had a soundtrack. How'd that work out for you? With their low price guarantee and people who actually care, Cruises It makes booking simpler, cheaper, and a whole lot less stressful. So click the link in the description below or call the number on the screen and tell them Evan from Family at Sea sent you. You'll be glad you did. Because our first cruise was our honeymoon, we didn't exactly have the luxury of picking the perfect time of year to sail. We just booked the cruise that fit our wedding timeline and went for it. But that first trip taught me pretty quickly how much the time of year can change the feel of the cruise. Because a spring break sailing feels completely different than a quieter week in the middle of October. Now, that doesn't necessarily make one better than the other, but it helps to understand what kind of atmosphere you're walking into beforehand, so your expectations can actually match the experience once you get on board. One thing I definitely didn't understand before my first cruise was how important the cruise line app actually is. At the time, I thought it was just there for check-in and basic information, but once I started cruising more, I realized a lot of the important stuff happens there before you ever step on board. That's where you'll usually book dining reservations, excursions, drink packages, Wi-Fi, and sometimes even entertainment. And on a lot of cruise lines, it's not only easier, it's also cheaper if you book them before the cruise instead of waiting till you're on board. Some cruise lines even require reservations for popular shows, and if you wait too long, you may not get to see them at all. Before my first cruise, I assumed embarkation day would feel relaxed the second we got to the terminal. But what I didn't realize is that there's a huge difference between boarding early and boarding after thousands of other people are already on board trying to do the exact same things you are. Every cruise line opens online check-in at a different point before the sailing, so figure out when yours opens and be ready to check in when it does to get the earliest check-in times possible. Because getting on board early gives you a short window where the ship still feels calm, when you can explore, grab food, make reservations, and actually enjoy the excitement of boarding before the crowds really take over. I definitely overpacked for my first cruise because I had this weird feeling that I needed to be prepared for every possible situation. And by the end of the trip, I realized there were clothes I never wore, shoes I never touched, and half the stuff I thought I might need never even left the suitcase. And at the same time, there were a few things I packed that ended up making the cruise way easier, especially small stuff most first-time cruisers never think about until they need it. If it's helpful, I'll link my Amazon Cruise Essentials list in the description below. It's full of the things we've genuinely found useful over the years, especially the little things that make life on board easier. There's no pressure to buy anything using my link, but if you do, please know how grateful I am for your support. Thank you. One thing I figured out pretty quickly on my first cruise is that once you find the bar you keep coming back to, take care of the bartender and, well, they'll usually take care of you too. And I'm not saying you need to throw around huge amounts of money, but a good tip early in the cruise goes a long way. I know some people have very strong feelings about tipping, but I'm not here to judge your tips. I'm simply trying to help you get the best possible service, and this is one of those things that makes a bigger difference than some would really like, because when you're trying to grab a drink at a crowded bar, the bartenders have a way of finding the people they know are looking out for them as well. Flying in the same day your cruise leaves might seem like a good way to save money on a hotel, until your flight gets delayed and suddenly the countdown to embarkation starts feeling very real. Because cruise ships don't wait for late flights. It doesn't matter why the delay happened or whether it was your fault. If you don't make it to the port on time, the ship leaves without you. And even if everything goes perfectly, spending the whole morning worrying about delays and watching the clock is not the ideal way to start a vacation. Flying in the day before may cost a little more upfront, but it makes embarkation day a much calmer experience. Before my first cruise, I assumed the cruise line excursions were basically my only option in port. And to be fair, booking through the cruise line is usually the easiest choice, and it comes with a peace of mind knowing the ship won't leave without you if something runs late. But after more than 100 private excursions over the years, we've never even been close to missing the ship, so don't let fear rob you of a far better experience. One thing I never would have thought to do after my first cruise was double check the onboard charges before getting off the ship. Because by the last morning, everyone's tired, rushing to pack, thinking about their flights home, and just trying to get through disembarkation. But mistakes happen, and more often than I really think they should. Drinks get charged to the wrong cabin, somebody forgets to remove a charge, or something gets duplicated. And if you wait until you're back home to try and get things fixed, you're pretty much out of luck. So take a few minutes on the last afternoon to review things closely, and if you don't spot an issue, head down to guest services to get it corrected. But don't wait until the evening unless you want to wait in a long line. By the end of my first cruise, I remember thinking, okay, I get why people keep doing this now. And that's exactly why cruise lines try to sell future cruise certificates on board while people are caught up in the moment of how amazing cruising truly is. And it's really simple. You can either go down and talk to a specialist on board who will help you pick a cruise, or you can just grab a form, fill it out, and drop it in their box, and they'll charge you a deposit on a cruise that you can choose later once you're back home, and in exchange, you'll get free onboard credits for that future cruise. Now, some people don't love the idea because you're kind of committing yourself to sailing that cruise line again. So if you still want to try a bunch of different cruise lines first, it may not make sense yet. But if you already know you loved the experience and you'd happily sail that line again, it's an easy way to save yourself money on the next cruise. One of the biggest lessons I've learned after more than 50 cruises is that there's no such thing as a perfect cruise. There's always going to be something that doesn't go the way you hoped. A port gets canceled, the weather changes, a meal disappoints you, or something breaks and something gets crowded, or something doesn't live up to the hype in your head. And at some point, I realized the people who enjoy cruising the most usually aren't the people with a perfect vacation. They're the people who know how to roll with it when things don't go perfectly. But if you go in with the mindset that no matter what happens on this cruise, I'm going to find the good, well, you're going to find it. But the opposite of that is true as well. So it's really up to you whether this is the trip of a lifetime or a trip you regret. But here's the bad news. Even if you do all the things I talked about in this video, if you choose the wrong cruise line for your personality, finding the good in the experience becomes a whole lot harder. But the good news, I made an entire video breaking down the major cruise lines, what they actually feel like once you get on board, and which one fits you best based on exactly what you're looking for. So don't stop here, watch that one next, and let's make sure your first cruise actually feels like the vacation you're hoping for. I'll see you over there. If you're ready, I am. Let's go.